Hi guys, in this video we'll look at Ableton Live's device view and see what kind of effects we can set up to manipulate our audio. We'll also look at how to change your device settings over time through automation. To start off with, make sure that you're in the arrangement view and that you're in device view rather than clip view. If you're in clip view, just press Shift-Tab to change to device view. An easy way to wrap your head around this view is to think of the audio as trying to travel down a conveyor belt from left to right. As the audio is picked up from the timeline, it travels along the device view from one device to another before being passed off to the master track. The device view will show you the devices that you've currently got sitting on the track manipulating the audio, and if this is a new session, it's likely that you'll have nothing on the track yet. Ableton Live comes with heaps of onboard effects already, which means that you can get started without having to buy any third-party plugins. To load a device onto your audio track, simply look in the browser under Audio Effects and drag something down onto the device chain. You can place multiple devices on the chain, and you can also change the order in which they process the audio. Simply grab onto the top of the device and drag it around to switch it with another one. Like I mentioned before, the audio signal will travel along the device chain like a conveyor belt from left to right, being passed through each device as it goes. For instance, you can place an equalizer plugin, followed by a reverb plugin. If you did this in the opposite order, the equalizer would not just be affecting the audio coming straight off the timeline, it would also be affecting the audio coming out of the reverb. That's why it's important to get the order of the effects right. Though some effects can be added to the device chain, played around with, and then left as they are, there will come many times when you need some of the effects parameters to move around, to go up or down or switch on or off as the timeline progresses, depending on the needs of your mashup. This is particularly true for changes we need to make during transitions, such as filtering, equalization, and volume controls. To accomplish this, you need to use automation. Automation basically gives instructions to Ableton to change parameters as playback moves through the timeline. This saves us having to click record and try desperately to get it right in one go. A common one would be a filter. Here we have a high-pass filter set up in Live's own equalization device, EQ8. We've set one of the bands to act as a high-pass filter, which will allow everything above the chosen frequency to pass through. Everything below it will be filtered away. However, over the course of an 8-bar section, let's say that we actually want the target frequency to increase, creating an effect where the bottom end seems to get sucked out of the music. Once you've figured out which parameter you want to control, find the relevant audio track and click the device drop-down under its title in the arrangement view. The drop-down will contain an option for mixer, as well as any of the devices that you've dropped onto the device chain. If you want to automate a setting that isn't part of a device, it will usually be found under the mixing heading. Controls like volume, pan, or mute. In the box below it, you select the value you want to control, such as gain, frequency, or send amount. In this case, we want to manipulate the EQ8 plugin, and then in the box underneath, we select the frequency for the particular band that we chose as our high-pass filter. After selecting it, you'll notice that an automation lane appears over the top of the waveform on the timeline. Double-click on the red line to create a new automation point, or double-click an existing point to delete it. It's important to remember that once you've created an automation track for a parameter, you can no longer make adjustments to the knob itself in the device panel. This is because you've instructed Live to follow your automation rather than any manual parameter changes that you might make with the mouse or another controller. If you did try to make a manual change without going through the automation lane, Live will sense the conflict and temporarily disable your automation. This means Live thinks that you've decided to abandon your automation for the time being, and it will continue to ignore instructions from the automation that you've written on the timeline until you tell it to follow it again. Causing Live to ignore your automation is a pretty common accident, so you can quite easily re-enable your automation by clicking the Re-enable Song Automation button up the top of the screen. If you decide that you don't actually want to have the parameter automated anymore, just go into the automation lane and delete all the breakpoints. This will free up the effects parameter for on-the-fly control with the mouse once again. By default, Live tries to conserve the space on the screen by only allowing one track of automation at a time. However, if you've got space to spare, you can create extra lanes of automation in order to make it easier for you to see what you're doing. You can do this by clicking the plus button next to the automation lanes. This is particularly useful if you've got one device where you want to automate two parameters at once, such as a filter where you might want to change the frequency but also the resonance. An extra automation lane is also useful in situations where you want to automate two different devices at once, such as a transition where you would likely need to control a high-pass filter as well as a volume control at the same time. Once you're finished, you can simply close the lane back up. To make blocks of automation that snap effectively to the timeline, keeping changes in rhythm, you can hold the B key to change your automation drawing method into draw mode. Or you can simply press the B key to toggle it on or off. This is quite essential in dance music because often the timings are so robotic that many of your automation needs will actually be quite sudden. The changes will need to occur right on the beat of the track, actions such as suddenly muting an element or pulling out all of the bass frequencies right on the point of a transition. Let's have a listen to what our filter automation sounds like. While we're looking at effects, let's take a quick look at return tracks. We'll discuss these in more detail when we're setting up an Ableton Live template for our mashups. But basically the purpose of a return track is to act as an effects track that can receive input from anywhere else in the session. That means you can set up an effect like a delay or a reverb, and every regular audio track has access to it. All it needs to do is send a little bit of audio there. Return tracks don't actually support audio or MIDI clips being placed on the timeline, because the purpose of return tracks is to receive audio from other tracks. Apart from that, they work in exactly the same way. The effects travel from left to right along the device chain, and you can set up any automation you like. You can even set up an automation on a regular audio track to determine how much audio is sent to a return track at any given time. We'll look at this in more detail when setting up your template. Finally, all the audio from audio tracks, instrument tracks, and return tracks will eventually make its way to the master track. Similar to a return track, it doesn't support any audio being placed directly on it. Instead, it relies on every other track in the session sending its audio to it. This is a great place to set up effects that control the dynamics of our music and make sure that we don't overload the output. Also, it means that any effects placed on the master will appear to affect everything in the entire song. One other thing to remember about the master track is that it can control global song functions through automation such as song tempo and master volume. So that's the basics of effects, the device view, and automation in Ableton Live. In the next group of videos, we'll be looking at setting up an Ableton Live template to make you a quick and efficient worker, as well as going into the basics of editing and arrangement. Thanks for watching.